If you have not gone to our channel at youtube.com/whatdrivesus, please do so. If you're not a subscriber, please click that subscribe button. But do watch yesterday's interview with Matthew Klippenstein. He was, by the way, a wonderful interview, mostly because Matthew talked and I just nodded, which was good because Matthew had really important stuff to say that was informed by a knowledgeable person actually doing the work, whereas I'm just this guy. So Matthew Klippenstein, for those of you who don't know him, you would probably know him the most. He used to do the Canadian EV sales tally, the monthly tally for Green Car Reports. I think he did some work for Inside EVs. He also does that for the National Observer. Is that a Canadian paper, Paul?
I don't remember it.
I don't either. Yeah, I have to admit, I'm like, so. Anyway, Matthew is a hydrogen
paper.
It is a oh no!
I believe he said National Enquirer.
No, a fine journalistic organ. Matthew is a hydrogen fuel cell engineer. He has spent his entire adult life working in renewables, wind and solar consulting, and now working on hydrogen fuel cells. I did a wonderful interview with him talking about this, and again, vis-a-vis that Bertel Schmidt article in the Drive. I think it's time to relook at hydrogen. Not necessarily, again, I think we've been on point where hydrogen has been all this time. And hydrogen for individually for consumer vehicles is still arguably in the United States a horrible idea. Other places, maybe not so much. But the progress that they made in the fuel cells and the gains that they can make, and here's the important part, as we get to more and more renewable power generation where we can afford to do electrolysis, even though the equation doesn't make sense, even though you lose a little electricity, the idea that hydrogen is this portable power supply, similar in some ways to gasoline, gives us other options.
Yeah, if it's
you're
free
saying,
to make, then it doesn't matter so much that you're wasting some of it. But
yes,
if you're taking it from natural gas or any kind of fossil fuel, it's not, no, yeah.
But so Russell, your argument is run the wind power at night when no one needs the energy, crack water into hydrogen, store the hydrogen until morning, fill up the long haul truckers to cross the country in hydrogen. Yeah,
that is exactly the argument. One of the arguments that Matthew made yesterday. Thank you, Paul.
And that can make sense. I don't see it at the corner gas station for the consumer, but for commercial applications where it's wasted energy anyway, like if no one uses that energy at night, you got to store it somehow, and that's one way to store it.
Yeah, and I think one of the one of the positives I think of the show that we put on every week is that I'm not afraid to point out when Russell was wrong. No. So like Russell said, we were on point and Matthew reinforced that. But the problem is we were narrow focused because we focus primarily on individual transportation. And we've been saying hydrogen doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Matthew laid out 5 or 6 very strong, like Russell said, logical points, situations in which hydrogen does make sense. And I was listening to the show as I was driving, as I carpool a lot, or not carpool, but I commute pretty far, and I listen to stuff. And as he was going on, I was just like, oh my God, it does make so much sense. And now I'm reframing my entire approach to a hydrogen transportation economy.
So you're drinking the hydrogen Kool-Aid now.
Well, it's an optimistic skeptic. Is that a thing?
Without hydrogen, I wouldn't be able to drink Kool-Aid.
I mean, if they could get like a lot of the diesel trucks off the interstate and power them with hydrogen fuel cells, that would be great. Now, how economical?
And well, see, and that was exactly one of the things Matthew said. A lot of these trucks could be battery powered around a dock, a port as they're moving stuff around. But if they need to go farther, instead of having a diesel generator to power the batteries, they would have hydrogen The hydrogen doesn't weigh as much of the batteries, and it doesn't take up as much space as the batteries. And I believe we mentioned this with the earlier article. Now you're not transporting your fuel source as much as you can transport more cargo, and that's where you make your money.
It does take up a lot of volume compared to liquid fuel. When I drove around the FCX Clarity for test drive, it did use that same approach, the serial hybrid, where if I was just putzing around, they just left the fuel cell stack kind of just idle, and it would do it all from the battery. But if I stepped on it and drained the pack, it would fill it back up.
But in that car, you had no trunk space, right? Because
there was zero trunk space.
Yeah, because you got to put the fuel storage somewhere. But it's a lot lighter than battery storage.
Oh yeah, it's way lighter than batteries, but it's more voluminous than.
But on a semi, you could put it under the trailer, in big.
We'll say that about batteries, though.
I want you guys to all know that I have photos, or I have video of Danny Cooper in the trunk of the Mirai.
How did you do that?
I'm not going to tell you.
Did you cut him up?
Did you cut him up?
No, I remember seeing
I
that.
didn't have to cut him up.
Child release to get out the glow in the dark child release thing.
He didn't have to cut him up, but he did, just for effect.
Made it easier,
Right.
His legs are really heavy. It's probably not an observation I should share in public.
A roaster.
Recorded medium.
Yeah. Suffice to say, I think I don't want to say that my view personally has changed on hydrogen, but I think it's been expanded, and I welcome that for anything. Whether it's my appraisal of a car company or a vehicle or of a type of fuel or whatever, I want to think that I'm always open to new information and to new developments, and to be able to adapt to incorporate that information and make my worldview better informed and more current. And I feel like that's where I'm at with hydrogen. I'm not a yay hydrogen fan, but I'm also maybe going to cut back by maybe 20% on the unicorn jokes. Only 20% though.
Okay, right. There is, and I do encourage all of our viewers and listeners, and if you're watching on YouTube, up in the upper right corner, up here, everyone look to your upper right, because there's an eye, and it is pointing everyone to Russell's interview. So go ahead and pause this video, watch that interview, and then come back. We'll wait. But there are a lot of good points in there. And to touch on something, Russell, that you alluded to earlier and said we would discuss later, I want to loop back to why Toyota hasn't chased electric vehicles. And I thought Matthew made a really good point when he said, when you excel in one area, it causes you to lag in other areas. Mm-hmm. And that's why right now people were saying Toyota had such the lead in hybrids. Why didn't they jump on batteries? And it was because they were rocking the hybrid world. They were so comfortable just making hybrids that they didn't jump into EV.
Yeah. Why did Kodak develop the first digital camera and then lose it all?
Yeah. And Toyota's sold over like 10 million hybrids worldwide since they started. That's a huge number.
So, his argument, and I'm not going to say it was correct or not, but to me, I thought it made sense.
So
that
I have a couple.
They let other people develop the battery technology. Prices are coming down. They're resting on their laurels, literally. Hey, we make really good hybrids. And now they're tipping their toe into the water of the plugins and still kind of toying with the BEVs, right? They promised a BEV in Japan and China. China next year. But in the meantime, they've just been sticking with what they do, which is the hybrids.
And given what's happened just in the last couple of weeks with the Chinese EV market, don't be surprised if they backtrack on that a little bit. Because, EV sales in China have cratered.
So let me ask a couple things. I've been polite and quiet, and I haven't cursed or anything.
What the fuck?
It's the whiskey.
Of Matthew's points that he made of the case of making his case for situations where hydrogen fuel cell vehicles made sense. Did any of those scenarios fit the Mirai?
the scenarios outside of the United States in some places, like, for instance, Japan, that is small, that has an existing hydrogen infrastructure. He made the argument that in places like Europe, it could make sense.
But I think
again,
you're exactly right, Evan. Yeah, it really not designed for individual personal transportation.
Okay.